I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Start out, we got any public comment? If not, I guess we'll move on. Need a motion to approve the agenda. Motion by Patty, second by Nancy to approve the agenda.
Can I have a discussion for a
Yeah.
moment? Could we please add definition of commercial for the yard waste?
Make that 9.5 or whatever. Commercial, you said?
Yeah.
It says commercial, and I've had some discussion on, am I commercial, am I not commercial? I said I would ask at the next available opportunity for discussion.
Okay. We'll add that 9.5 for commercial dumping. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion carried. I'd like to go out of our public meeting to a public hearing for the sewer department.
That's me. All right, I want to stand right in front of that. So, I have a couple visuals here. If you're here for the public meeting, you could, before you leave, there's a sign-in sheet. You can just put your name and either address or email. It's one of the requirements that the state has to try to get, it's one of the requirements to try to get funding through the state revolving fund program. So on the township's website, there was this draft project plan, which kind of goes through a little bit of history of the sewer district, the sanitary sewer and wastewater treatment plant, some of the condition assessment items, need for a project, and some other items in there, including the cost estimate, which I'm sure everybody's most interested to hear about. But this public meeting is a requirement to try to get state revolving funds, since that's a federal and state program for funding for public infrastructure. There are a lot of rules that you have to check all the boxes to make sure that it can get scored, and the state will then look through all of their project plans and the scoring and come up with a list. So this is just one of the formal requirements, is to take public input and to do this meeting. So some other requirements are the intent to apply, which is like a one-pager, kind of a very brief description of the project and cost, was submitted to the state back in November. So we checked that one, we did that one. And then the final project plan, so this is the draft copy. The final project plan has to be submitted to the state by May 1st, which is just in a couple days here. And then the public participation, which is what this public meeting is for. So the state revolving fund primarily is a loan program, a low interest loan. You're probably all aware that interest rates, if you were to go take out a new mortgage right now or take out a loan for a new car, the rates are really high, 6% or higher. So the state revolving fund is a low interest loan. It's subsidized by the government with either a 2.5%, 2 3/4, or a 2%. 1% would be for communities that are significantly overburdened with really low MHIs.
How are they determined if they were overburdened?
Yep, there's a very lengthy calculation that the state does. We submitted a preliminary overburdened scoring application with the financials for the township sewer department, and it looks like you're going to fall here under the overburdened, so it would be a 2% loan. 1% is really hard to get in places like Detroit, but 2% is great. And it also, if you're overburdened, if there is grant monies available, you can sometimes get those as well. But it is primarily a loan program. So, agenda for the public meeting, we're going to go through project background, the need for a project. We looked at a couple different alternatives, although there was really only one that is worth worth pursuing. The recommended alternative, and then what does that do to your user rates at those loan terms? And then we'll talk about project schedule, and we'll take questions at the end. So we kind of looked at population projections for the 20-year term. It's one of the things that the state requires, but the sewer system doesn't serve the whole community, it's just the lake community. So we kind of took the overall township growth that Montcalm County projected and used that as just a real nominal growth, 0.44% per year. So right now there's about 1,066 customers hooked up to sewer. That's about 2,800 people, and it's a lagoon facility, so it only discharges a couple times a year. It stores the wastewater all winter, discharges in the spring, discharges in the fall. So those are just some of the records. Takes in about 130,000 gallons per day, although it varies a lot. If it's rainy, it's a wet area, as you know. With the lakes here and everything, groundwater is pretty high. So in the springtime, like it rained a lot today, I'm sure the water levels, or the water coming in was up. But on average, it's about 130,000 gallons per day. And like I said, it is discharged kind of in batches. Just a little graphic to show you. The original system was just around Crystal Lake, and that was built in 1977 as part of that original project. That's when the treatment plant was also built. And then a very small area was extended in 2001 in that green circle. And then the Duck Lake area was built in about 2005. So the system currently includes 15 major lift stations, 28 grinder pump stations, 3.6 miles of force main, which is what the pump stations pump into, and then 5 miles of gravity sewer. There's about 283 manholes, and then each of those pump stations has a wet well, usually a valve pit, and there's a few other miscellaneous structures. So the treatment plant, like I mentioned, is a lagoon facility. It's got irrigation fields. Was built in 1977. Hasn't changed a whole lot since then. There's been some maintenance and some other items done, but pretty much it's still the same lagoon system that it was back in 1977. And it is a discharge where it discharges to the irrigation fields. So when it's the dry season, it'll discharge out to that. And eventually makes its way to the smooth drain. So we actually came out, you might have seen our trucks around here last summer and fall. We were doing some manhole inspections where we popped open the manholes, looked at them, took pictures of them, did a condition assessment scoring based on what it visually looked like. Just a couple photos of that. We also did the same thing for the lift stations, looked at all the valve chambers. One good thing is most of the pumps have been recently replaced, so we were focusing mostly on the valve chambers and some of that original piping, like in here. That's still kind of, getting toward its useful life. And then we also came out and did an inspection at the wastewater treatment plant. Noted a couple of the structures that are original to the 1977 construction are, they've got some corrosion here. Nothing unusual for the age. It's overall in pretty good condition. It's just that some of the equipment is getting kind of old. 1977 was longer ago than some people like to believe. I can't believe it's 2024, So we kind of took all that condition assessment data, we talked with the operations staff, and we looked at a couple different ways to address it. one thing the state makes you look at is what happens if you don't do anything. Basically, things will just continue as they are. The equipment will continue to get older, and it could be problematic in the future. Another item that the state requires you to look at is a regional alternative. So what if we collected all the wastewater from this area and pumped it to the nearest treatment plant? Well, there's not really a nearby one. That's why you have your own system. I think the nearest one's more than 6 miles away, and that's just not cost effective to do. So the third option is really just to look at that critical infrastructure and rehabilitate it, improve it so that it'll last for the foreseeable future. And that's really what we looked at doing. So, like I mentioned, alternative one, no action, nothing's going to be done, no construction project. It really doesn't meet the township's goals of continuing to provide reliable service to Crystal Lake and Duck Lake sewer customers. Eventually, things will continue to deteriorate. Alternative two, like I mentioned, the nearest wastewater plant is about 6 miles away. It would be very expensive to pump all of that, build a really large force main, and then buy capacity at another treatment plant. So the third option is to rehabilitate those manholes and the lift station structures that need to be fixed, and then do some minor repairs at the treatment plant. So the manhole rehabilitation, there's about 283 manholes that need to have some sort of improvements. We looked at most of the manholes, all that we could access. Some of them were paved over. We're not able to get into them at this point in time. So those ones, we're going to recommend that access be improved to them. Manholes exist so that if there's a clog in the pipe, they're spaced out about every 300 to 400 feet. If there's a clog in the pipe, you can open it and inject just that section, do maintenance, so that's kind of why they're there. So if you can't access several of them in a row, that can be an issue for your DPW staff. So that's several of them. We're going to recommend improving access to them and bringing them up so that, you go back to that picture. Right here, here's one, you can just barely see. The manhole is under that kind of area. You can see it got paved over. It's a little lower than the rest of the road, so when it rains, water's going to pool there, and nothing's ever completely watertight, so that'll eventually get in there. So some of the manholes look like that. We want to improve that. Others have leakage or cracking in the walls. We want to line those so that they don't allow groundwater to keep coming in and causing issues at the treatment plant. You don't want to pay for treating clean water, basically. And then at some of the lift stations, two of the stations, lift station 7 and 11, were in pretty poor condition overall. So we're recommending a total reconstruct of those ones. And then there's a few other lift stations that are original from 1977, and we're just recommending rehabilitating the valves and the valve chamber. So the pumps are good, and the wet well's good. Just some of those old valves only last 20 years, maybe 30 if you're real careful with them, but they're beyond that. They need to get replaced to make sure that those lift stations stay good. And then there's a few minor things at the treatment plant. Some of the control structures, so you've got your ponds and then you have some more concrete structures with piping to transfer water from one to the other. Some of those are in poor condition. Yeah.
I did reference in the packet the numbers 2, 7, and 11 are all lift stations that are failing,
Yeah.
but you're only going to replace 7 and 11.
Yeah, 2 is going to be improved. It doesn't need to be completely reconstructed. For cost, we thought we could just improve what's necessary
Just
there.
listed that they were all failing on it. That was my question, is why you're only replacing 2 of them.
Yeah.
Can you be more specific and identify where these are located at?
Oh, sure. I don't know if I have a map not in the PowerPoint. However, it is in the project plan. So bear with me. See if I can find it real quick.
Seven's right down here by the park. And 11's over by the sailboat club.
Oh, different labels.
Sailboat club, and right here by the park.
Okay, sorry, I thought I had a map that showed it. Sure I do.
You just answered the question.
Okay, well, I was hoping to bring it up on a map that everyone could see, but. Alright. I think this map shows it. It doesn't label which one's which, but if you do go on the website, there's a lift station here. Myers Avenue, the one you were talking about?
Down here
Yeah,
by the park.
that's one of them by the park. And then there's one up by North Shore Drive on the north side of Crystal Lake. Okay? Alright. Make sure we'll label that in the final project plan. That's where those are.
92 on that PDF, or if you've got a copy of it.
Yeah, it's on the website. But it's also kind of hard to see at the scale, but it's the one up here and the one over there. So, sorry about that, I should put that on here. So at the treatment plant, control structures and some piping that's original from 1977 that just needs to get replaced. One thing we'd like to do is, back in the 70s, people didn't have these things called flushable wipes. And rags weren't really a thing that treatment plants were dealing with. They've been kind of a real nuisance at treatment plants recently. And in lagoon systems, the thought was, well, they'll just settle out in the lagoons. Well, you still gotta get them there, and most lagoons, including this one, has an influent structure. And they do tend to pack in there, and that's just a pain for someone to go shovel them out. So we'd like to install some.
You say you flush out the lagoon, what, the spring and fall? Where does it go
It-
after you flush it?
Oh, sorry, they don't flush it. They discharge out of it when the irrigation fields are dry.
Well, you use the term discharge, and I'm using the term.
Yeah.
The same thing.
It gets discharged to the adjacent fields.
All right.
And it's actually, I guess I misspoke, it's more during the summer when it's dry, that it gets sent out to the irrigation fields. Other types of treatment plants will discharge like a daily amount, like continuously, but a lagoon system kind of holds it. And this one, it discharges to a irrigation field when it's dry. Can't do it when the ground is wet or frozen. So it's kind of on a batch system, just depending on the weather. Couple other things that need to be done is, like we were talking about the irrigation system, so that gets pumped out to the field. That irrigation pump needs to be replaced. And then the lagoons have a berm around them, that's what it's called. And there's been some things done to try to keep that berm intact over the years, but there's a few other places that needs to be kind of just repaired.
And is that the facility on Minor Road, is that what you're talking about?
Yep. I think I have some pictures of the treatment plant coming up here. So for collection system improvements, like I mentioned, some of the manholes need to be lined. Here's just a picture of one of the lift stations. Have a couple pictures of the treatment plant. But we mentioned influent structure. There's two intermediate structures that you can bring water from one lagoon to the other that need to be replaced, and then the effluent structure, and then the irrigation system, the irrigation building needs to have a new pump in there, and some minor improvements to piping and mechanical equipment. And then piping out at the irrigation field itself, as well as some minor berm repairs. So, another thing that the state requires, because it is federal and state money, to make sure all the improvements projects, the construction projects don't have any lasting impacts to wetlands, cultural resources like historic buildings, things like that, or endangered species. We don't anticipate any of that here. We're talking about improving existing manholes that are already in the ground, just lining them with a structural liner. Work out at the treatment plant that's already been made into a treatment plant, so there's no wetlands or anything like that. There will be some temporary construction impacts, as you can imagine. We'll have to do some excavation work for some of that improvements, so you'll have temporary, dust and things from equipment. Some other items, we'll have to get the appropriate permits, so we'll need township approval. We would work with the township on determining hours for construction. Obviously, we're not gonna be doing construction, after 5 o'clock in the evening per se, or before 7 in the morning, things like that. And then we'll do dust control, especially in the summer when it gets dusty. We'll have to have a soil and erosion permit from the county, and then the state has a construction permit for wastewater infrastructure that they have to review and approve all the plans and specifications. So, and we do that for all of our municipal sanitary type wastewater projects. So the cost, which is probably everybody's most important item, to do all the things that we were talking about, all the manhole lining, all of the lift station work that we were talking about, the treatment plant work, including design and engineering, construction inspection, and then including a 10% contingency. You're looking at about $6.1 million to do it all. I know that's a big number. So that's why the township's looking to try to get this funding from the state, to try to help get a low interest loan or potentially a grant. Really, that's really what we're trying to qualify for, some grant funding to bring that loan amount down. So what happens next is we'll submit the final project plan in a couple days here to the state. The state gets them all from the whole state, or municipalities throughout the state, all on May 1st. As you can imagine, they get quite a few of them. Last year they got a record amount because they actually had grant money. So they take, 2 to 3 months to review them all. It is a competitive process, so they do score them based on some criteria, including whether or not it's a financially overburdened community, which I mentioned. Preliminary numbers look like this one would be. And then whether or not there's violations of the permit, discharge permit, which you don't have. There's a whole list of things that you can get points for. And then ultimately, the state looks at how much money do they have this year in the budget versus how much was requested, and they just go down the list. And they publish the draft list in usually late August, early September, and then they have a public meeting on that, public hearing, and then they finalize it. And what we always do for our clients is make sure they didn't miss any points when they did the scoring, because we have found that the state, they get so many and sometimes they do miss points, so we always double check it, we talk to them, make sure we feel like you guys got all the points you qualified for, and then the state usually finalizes their plan in early October, right about when the budget is set for the state. So we should have a good idea of whether this project would get funded and what level of grant funding it might have in about the fall. If the project doesn't get funded, we can look at other avenues for funding, like rural development, which does have grants usually, although rural development program has had some challenges this year with the federal budget not being actually set in a very timely manner. So that one, you know, it sort of just depends who's in office with some of these programs, but rural development finally found out what their allocation was gonna be when they were supposed to find out in October. They just found out like 2 weeks ago, so kind of crazy. But anyway, that's another avenue we can look at, and there's other infrastructure grants out there that, but SRF and rural development are kind of the best ones. But the state makes us look at, okay, what is the user impact? Because it is supposed to be just like a loan program. Sometimes they have grants, sometimes they don't. So we looked at what would it do to the sewer rates if you had to borrow all 6.1 million for 20 years or 30 years at the 2% rate. So at a 20-year loan at the 2% rate, it would make your sewer rates go up about $29 a month. At a 30-year loan at 2%, it would be a $21.30 per month increase. Now, the good news is, I know that's a big number. The good news is some of our clients got 25% grant last year, 50% grant. Some even got 100% grant. You don't know until the fall. But if you got a 50% grant, that number would be halved. So instead of, $21, you're looking at about $11 increase per month.
So is this on top of our 20 a month that we already
It
paid
would
out?
be, yes. Yep, that's the increase. So you'd add that to your current.
$120 every 3 months.
Does that include the people that are not on the sewer line?
No, this
Okay,
is
that's
just those that get a sewer bill now that are connected to the sewer. They would be funded just through the sewer
So
rates.
people who have a place on the lake and a place across the lake, you have 2 sewers, then you get double.
Yep, it would be per
More
each,
than double. Yeah.
per each hookup. Now, I just want to mention, because I know the costs are a little scary, there are other options if it doesn't get funded. The township can always, not move forward with this big project all at once. And there are some things that, the township can do to do parts of it, kind of phase it out, and either finance it that way, or, do it with cash over a long time. There are other ways to do that. What we're trying to do now is just make sure that we put in this application, because you're not gonna get the money if you don't ask for it, right? See where it falls. The other good thing is the project plan that gets submitted this year is good for 5 years. So you wouldn't have to redo it and have another meeting like this. It would just get rescored. Like if it doesn't get funded this year, it would just get rescored for next year. And the township wouldn't have to redo any of that effort. It would just get put in the queue and they'd rescore it. And that's good for 5 years.
Is this for anybody who, because I know people who had more than one lot, even though these lots don't use these sewers, they still have to pay that, correct?
This would
If you have a
be,
sewer hookup not being used.
this would be rolled into your, I don't know exactly how it works, but usually it's rolled into your readiness to serve fee, for RU, so.
Kim, I'm not sure, but I think that if there's no house on that lot, there is probably not.
Just if you get a sewer bill.
Right.
If you're getting a bill right now, if you're getting your $20 a month bill now, you'd get $20 plus $21.30 if the project were to go forward.
I just know there's some people that were told if they had a lot, they had to have a sewer hookup, regardless if they had a home there or not.
Back when it was built?
No.
Oh.
Getting a bill on it?
There's the ability.
I don't know if there's a bill on it or not, I just know some people have
There's the
sewer
ability to,
hookups.
But it's not charged if they're not.
See, that I don't know.
Yeah.
That's what I was wondering.
This is gonna be part of the sewer charge system, so, it would be if you're getting a bill now, so those 1,066, residences that are getting a bill now would get this increase, if it were to move forward through the SRF program. Like I mentioned, there are other grant programs we can look at, but this was one You know, they had some grant money available last year, they have a little bit this year, so we'll just kind of have to see how it goes. Once that list is published, which is right about here, SRF project priority list published in September through October, we'll be talking with the township board, DPW staff to see, okay, are you in the fundable range? What's the grant look like? What's the loan look like? Are you gonna be able to afford that? Do we need to maybe scale it down and just do part of it? We can have those conversations at that point in time. We just wanna make sure we get this application in, so you can see if you can qualify for some of these.
So if we do the application in by May 1st,
Mhm.
and it comes back in October that we weren't eligible for anything, then we can just stop and decide to do nothing at that point, we're not.
You can, yep. Or we can very easily convert this report into a rural development application. For like a nominal fee. I mean, we've done all the engineering, it would just be kind of filling out their applications. They have a few other forms because it's a federal program that you need to do, but it's not a huge dollar amount. Most of the, stuff you pay for is in the cost estimating and the inspections that we did.
What happens if we put in for the permit, it comes October, we're getting too much slack, people don't wanna do it, is there a fine if we get out of her?
You mean if you accept the funding and then you
Back out?
back out? There's not a fine. You can back out all the way until just before the loan would be to close in August. But to get to the loan closing, you do have to go through final design, so you know your engineer's money. But you can back out before that. At any time in here until the loan closes, you can.
Would that have any effect on the metrics of if we resubmit it the next year, then is that gonna bump our score down?
No, their scoring is very prescriptive, and it has more to do with the condition of the facility, your financials, if you've had violations, if the improvements project is needed to bolster the reliability of the system, that kind of thing.
Oh, how come we didn't see no pictures on our grinding stations?
There's a whole bunch of pictures.
You plan on redoing some of our grinding stations too?
No, actually, the grinder stations aren't too bad. I don't think we did take any photos.
Are there grinder pumps at every lift station?
Well, a lot of the lift stations, the pumps have been replaced recently, so they're in really good condition. I think some of them are grinders and some of them are like flight non-clog type pumps.
Yeah, the big lift stations are submersible pumps
And they were recently
grinder
replaced.
stations have grinder pumps in them.
Yeah. The grinder stations serve a lot smaller, like a couple homes. Yeah, the big pump stations collect a lot of wastewater from gravity and then it gets pumped. So this is kind of the schedule. It kind of goes through, if the project were to get funded, you'd be looking at, moving forward in the fall with survey, if that's the way the township wants to move forward. And then doing design during the winter with final plans and specs kind of sent to the state right around this time next year. And then the loan would close next summer. And then construction would start in the fall. And then depending on weather, this year, construction projects were able to continue throughout most of the winter, but that's kind of unusual. Usually they take a little bit of a break in the winter and then move on them in the spring. So we're looking at probably a couple-year process by the time, we find out the project's funded, the township decides to move forward with it, and when it's all done. So, if you have any questions, I know I took a couple during the presentation, but now is the time. Sir?
Okay, so first off, how much of this work approximately is being done in the Duck Lake circuit versus the Crystal circuit? Because the Duck Lake circuit is quite a bit newer
Right.
than the Crystal circuit, and I see the two lift stations that were planned on being redone are also in the Crystal circuit. So is also a large amount of the manhole funding that are also taking place in the Crystal area as opposed to the Duck Lake?
Sure. So if you could, just for the public record, for the clerk, if you could just state your name and address.
Jeremy Anderson,
And your address.
over on Duck Lake, 1725 Beach Drive.
Yeah, so, the Duck Lake system was built in 2005 and it's PVC pipe. The pipe's in really good shape. We did look at all of the manholes that were accessible and we even dug into, some of them that weren't easily, if they were in the gravel, we did dig up some of them and look at them. Ones that were paved over, we didn't do that, we didn't wanna ruin your pavement. Just to inspect them. But some of the manholes, even in Duck Lake, because manholes are made out of concrete, usually, sometimes they're block, but newer manholes are concrete, and they're made in sections, and they can leak even at those sections. So there are several manholes in Duck Lake that are also, on the list of those that need to get lined with a structural liner.
Any sort of like percentage between the two areas that you could
I
give,
mean-
even a rough number? Obviously, $6 million, how that's,
I don't
Split
have
apart.
that, I could look into it and get back with you. That is part of this public hearing process, is I'll get your address and we will write you a formal, because I don't have, I just have the total number. I don't know precisely which ones were Duck Lake versus Crystal, as far as the manholes go. The lift stations, the full reconstructs are all on the Crystal Lake system, but there are a couple, I believe, that are needing, no, actually I take that back.
yeah, I thought those looked pretty good as far as the score.
Yeah, I think it's, I think all of them are from the original construction. But there are a few, actually. Actually, it is pretty much all of the manholes, because of the way the water table is here. It is pretty much all the manholes in Duck Lake. Now, there are fewer manholes over there than there are in Crystal, but, we are actually planning to line them all. Lining is a pretty cost-effective amount.
And when you say lining, are you talking about putting like a thin plastic membrane in there and then that seals up against the concrete? Like, how is the
It's
lining
not
process done?
plastic, it's very thick, it's like a epoxy resin, it actually, chemically bonds to the wall of that concrete
Mhm.
and forms it's not just a impermeable for water, it's actually gonna structurally keep that manhole intact.
And do you know what the lifetime, age of how long that's
Yeah,
supposed to last for the waterproofing?
It has a manufacturer's warranty of 10 years, but it's expected to last 30, so it would last for the whole lifetime of the loan.
Okay.
And oftentimes it lasts longer than that. It just depends on the exact condition. We're actually doing a big lining project with the same type of liner out in Belting, right down the road.
Mm.
They're actually gonna start lining it next week.
Are you saying because the water level is higher at Duck Lake, that's why that they need to have this done?
Actually, the water level in the whole township area is very high. If you were to dig in your yard, you'd encounter water, especially this time of year, not very far down. And so the manholes are down, 10 to 15 feet in the soil. And at any of those joints, or if there's any sort of cracking in that concrete, water will seep in. Which,
I guess I'm wording this question differently. I thought that the area in Duck Lake was a lot marshier than around Crystal. And that's why they would probably need this to prepare them for the future.
yeah, I mean, we looked at manholes in both systems, and they both had evidence of water coming in. We took pictures of every structure that we looked at, and you can see staining, and sometimes you can see active water coming into the wall. So it's in both systems. I wouldn't say one's worse than the other. It's just the way manholes leak sometimes in Michigan. Yeah, if you do have questions, if you could just state your name.
I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. Just want to make sure we're by the book.
Oh, Bonnie Knetz, 1949 Straight Town. Question, when you talked about going over the financials of the township, you know, versus what we're, each individual sewer user outlet is gonna be paying extra. What financials are you looking at for the township, as far as, the validity of approving this project?
Yeah, so there's a couple different things. We talked about that overburdened calculation. So unfortunately, the township's median household income is what is used by the state for that. It's hard in townships where only maybe a portion of the sewer area is sewered. They just don't have it broken down because it comes from the census data, your median household income. So it looks at the whole township's median household income for that. But then other things that go into that calculation are the actual sewer fund that the township has, but it's an enterprise fund, so it's collecting revenue from just the sewer connections. It's not like the whole township's paying for it. So that was rolled into that calculation as far as what the existing annual operations and maintenance budget is, what the existing bonds, if any, what the existing debt is, and then what the proposed, $6.1 million loan would do to the user rates.
So who's, makes the decision whether it's a 20-year loan or a 30-year loan?
Oh, so only those overburdened communities can qualify for a 30-year loan. And then if you are overburdened, it would be up to the township board to decide if it's going to be a 20 or 30-year loan. And they would work with a municipal financial advisor to do that. Most overburdened communities are taking the 30-year option, just to spread it out over a longer time to reduce the impact to the users.
So what you were quoting, the extra, what was it, $21 and some odd cents per user, that was based on a 20-year?
That was based on a 30-year.
30-year at the 2%?
Yeah.
Based on the number of users that we have here?
Mm-hmm.
So that would be about the lowest we could go?
Unless you get grant money. Yeah.
What is the, this is kind of, what is the chance of getting grant money nowadays?
I mean, I can't tell you that. It's up to the state when they look at their state allocation, how much amount of money they got for grant money to hand out versus how many communities would qualify for the grant. If you're not overburdened, you can't qualify for the grant. So you've already got one pro. You are considered overburdened, so you could get grant if there's grant. I can't tell you what it would be.
Can you apply for grant money the second year, or the third year, or the fourth year that you're in this project, and continue applying to hopefully garner more grant monies?
Sorry, I misunderstood. I should listen before I talk. I thought you meant if it wasn't funded this year at all, you could apply for the grant money next year.
Right.
But if it was funded, say a 30% grant, and you move forward with it, you're locked into that 30% grant. So you'd have
30-year.
30-year loan. But if you got a 30% grant, say
of 30% of the cost of the project, right? Like $2 million or whatever it is.
Yep. Then you'd have a loan for the remaining like 4.1 million. You're kind of stuck with that loan because the loan closes as soon as you bid it out to contractors. So you can't like go back and try to get more grant. If that makes sense. I will tell you that this year, next year may be the last 2 years that the state has grant money available, because usually it's called the state revolving fund, revolving in that it's a loan program. So communities that take out the loan pay back the loan over time with interest so that the state's revolving loan fund grows over time, right? Well, in the last couple of years, with ARPA dollars, they had a lot of grant money to give out from the federal. Now, the ARPA dollars are not available, they've been used. But the bipartisan infrastructure law, the BIL, the big IIJA, BIL thing that, the president was pushing through, they still have 2 more years of allocation on that. So this year and next year.
So the best possibilities are now, you're saying?
Unless Congress comes up with more infrastructure funding, which has been a very hot topic. I wouldn't rule it out, but at this moment, this year, next year are the best opportunities.
Barbara Leonard, Cove Trail. Can we use I heard you talking about ARPA money, can we use ARPA money to help pay on our loans? Or to bring down
No,
our
because
loans?
ARPA money must be expended, like allocated by the end of this fiscal year, and actually spent by, I forget, but it's sometime in
December
2026.
December 31st.
And this project isn't going to move forward until 25, so you wouldn't be able to do that. Now, you might be able to put it toward design, potentially, if you have any left. That's something we'd have to work out with. If it got funded this year, we'd have to work that out with the township and the municipal, financial director. But I would say, use your ARPA money now, because it needs to be, you need to show that you've got it used, or they're gonna ask for it back.
Kim Morgan, 249 Human. Now, how about the USDA, the rural?
Yep, so one thing you can do, and what we've had a couple of our clients do this year, or last year, they were in this process at this time, a year ago. So last fall, they found out that they were gonna get like a 30% grant. Well, they didn't wanna lose that, but they also couldn't really afford to take out a loan for the whole 70%. So they did an application for rural development to see if they could get some grants and mix and match, which you can do, but it gets a little tricky with the timing on it. So they're actually still trying to work that through right now.
How much can you go for the USDA?
Rural development has a max of 7%. And the max is kind of hard to get to because it very much depends on how much grant money they have available to give out, which varies year to year based on the federal government budget. And I will tell you that a lot of the bipartisan infrastructure money and the ARPA funds in the past got put to the state revolving fund programs and not to rural development for whatever reason. So we've seen a lot more people go for SRF funding in the last couple of years, but that money's also starting to dry up, so I think the best course of action is to kind of put this in, since we're already done with it, put it in, see how things work out. In September, look at the draft list, and if it looks like there's no way, then, convert this to a rural development application for a pretty minor fee. That's what I would recommend.
Yeah, on the manholes, did you have a breakdown of bad to good to bad? Which ones are good and which ones are bad?
Yes, I don't have that with me, but we do have their structural NASCO ratings. So we did a manhole assessment condition program, rating on it, so we know which ones have structural defects and what the severity is, and which ones have leakage and what the severity is. And we do have them all listed.
North Shore's got some bad ones. But on this side of town, they look like new.
Yeah, I can definitely get you that. Well, yeah, there was evidence of some of them having issues. The severity kind of depends.
I know that's a low number compared to some of these numbers in here.
Yeah.
Also, how did you get to all these numbers? New irrigation pivot. You must be talking about the north pivot, because the south pivot's new.
Yep.
And you got $250,000 for that. That's a smaller pivot than we just put in for $37,000.
A new one?
From
We based it off from similar projects that we've done in the last couple of years.
I just think that a lot
I
of
mean-
this stuff could be done way cheaper.
Well, you gotta remember, a contractor would bid on this, and a contractor's gonna mark everything up. It would be cheaper if you like did it yourself, right?
A lot cheaper.
But the way that this program is, you do a big project, you bid it out, and then the general contractor is gonna usually win the bid, and then they're gonna have subcontractors, and they may all have a markup on it.
In my pump house, you got to replace the pump, that pump's not very old. You say you gotta have two of them, 25,000 apiece.
Mhm.
I paid 2,700 for that one. I do have a spare,
Yeah, that includes the installation for the pump.
yeah, it takes about half an hour.
Again, you're gonna have a mechanical contractor, an electrical contractor, and a general contractor, and they're all gonna, we've seen, so another thing, we did intentionally make the numbers in this grant application, this financing application, a little fat. And the reason for that is because we've seen construction costs go up astronomically in the last couple of years, and you're kinda locked into that price. When you go to close on the loan, after bids are opened, a year and a half from now, you don't wanna be short, right? So they are a little fat, I'd say, but we've seen too many projects that they go and open the bid, especially when you've got pumps and things like that, and they're 20% over, and then what do you do now? Cause you're locked into that amount of money that the state gave you. So if I was to come up here and tell you it's gonna be 5.8 million, and then in a year and a half, we go design it, bid it, and the low bid comes in at 6.1 million, you're short, right? So that's kind of one of the things.
I don't know if there's, Barbara, is there such a thing as self-contract? I mean, I'm hearing him say that you were able to do a project for 27 and yours is larger, or so that we could be the contractor for doing these projects with the money coming out? Or do we have to go with the person that's
It would have to be done by a qualified contractor.
a qualified, what kind of contractor, electrical contractor?
Yeah, I mean, usually you bid it all as one big project.
Then the other connected question is, if we were able to do that, when we were able to get it at a lower price, then that would cut down on the amount of the loan that's due? Or do they
Yeah.
keep track of that?
Well, the loan amount is set based on what your bid opening is gonna be.
Okay.
So we do the design after the township decides to move forward, if we find out that it's gonna get funded. We do the design. We can try during design phase to cut costs, like, once we know exactly what pump model that's gonna be and what manufacturer, we can like look at 4 or 5 manufacturers and try to find the lowest one, which we do. We can reduce that contingency, and we may be able to open bids lower than the 6.1 million. But, like I mentioned before, we wanna make sure, or be as sure as possible that we're not gonna open bids up high.
I've got a question about the grinders. You said you were mentioning about the baby wipes. And I know in the past, we've had issues with our grinders. So why are we not doing anything with our grinders when we've had issues in the past with baby wipes in our grinders? But you're saying that we're not doing anything with our grinders.
Right?
Doesn't make sense to me.
Well,
I've rebuilt all the grinders in the lot.
yeah,
They're not only probably 6, 7 years old, they've all
Right.
been completely rebuilt.
So is
I
that,
do got
why-
a couple left to do.
is that taking care of our problems with our
Um,
baby wipes?
No.
don't
have
flush wipes.
I have problem areas, like problem houses, and talk to them, and if they don't get resolved, I bought a pump that will do it. So we got probably 6 or 7 of them pumps out here that chews them up and spits them out.
Yeah.
My
But then
big
it
lift
becomes your
station
problem.
just sends them out to the sewer.
So, I mean, that's the thing, there's not really a fix on those grinder stations that's gonna really deal with the wipes in a desirable way. You can put in a pump that might pump it through, but then it's gonna be a problem at the wastewater plant or in one of the lift stations if it goes through another lift station. So there are ways to do it, but ultimately the homeowner should just really be careful about not putting things like that down the sewer. And this is a problem everywhere. It's a problem in Grand Rapids,
Well,
it's a
I've heard
problem
about that
here.
years ago in Grand
I mean,
Rapids.
in fact, there's a whole bunch of legislation in the works that they want people in the, like the Procter & Gamble that make these and the Kleenex people, they don't want that label on there that says you can't flush them, because that's convenient for people. But it's causing a whole issue for the whole sewer industry, it's not just here.
So that's why I wondered why you weren't gonna do anything about that, but you had mentioned that, and I thought, well, why would you
There's
mention that?
not really
You're
a
not doing anything
good
about it?
solution to it, and
Okay.
it's more of a, you need to be careful what you flush. That's really the most cost-effective thing. Sir?
Jeremy Anderson again, 1725 Beach Drive. So I was reading through your little proposal there, and I noted in there was at least one or two spots where it said that there had been no previous unauthorized discharges out of the lagoon over here, and then we've heard from him that the grinders are in pretty good shape, and we've heard that the Duck Lake area, the pipes are in pretty good shape. So, and out of all this, we've pretty much identified 2 lift stations that are the problem, shed with some stuff in it over at the lagoon, maybe some berms over the lagoon. It sounds to me like that there's not really that much wrong with our system currently. So why are we jumping into this huge expense to rebuild the whole thing where we're not having fines for unauthorized discharges because we're taking in too much water, too much sewage waste? Why are we going out of our way to make this an issue? Is it really to benefit the town long-term, or are we setting ourselves up for a huge cost, which really, I mean, I kind of looked at the proposal, and it looked like to me that like the engineering overall was running about 18% of the whole project cost. Is that a fair number?
That's pretty
Okay.
typical.
So about a $1.2, $1.5 million of this $6 million cost is directly gonna benefit your company to engineer this project. So did the problem get brought to our attention, or did we bring the problem to your attention? Like, where was the problem originally? Like, who came up with the idea originally to go down this road and say, you know, we should undertake this giant study to then potentially take out a $6 million loan, which based on 1,660 users is taking out a loan, each of our names that own a house, of about $5,700.
Right. Yeah, so just a couple things about what you said. We're not rebuilding like the whole system. We're rehabilitating existing infrastructure that needs it because of reliability concerns.
Where's the reliability issue though for not having unauthorized discharges?
Well-
Are people getting like sewer backing up into their house? What is the reliability
The
measure that we're using?
Sure. The reliability issues at the treatment plant is some of that piping's in pretty poor condition, right? And you need a treatment plant to work. Some of those valves and things that move the water from one pond to the other or to the irrigation system require a lot of babysitting or repair if they go down, things like that. So that's one thing. As far as the lining of the manholes, Kevin had mentioned that on a rainy day or when the groundwater is high, like in the spring, it gets a lot of extra water coming to the treatment plant, which you run the risk of overtopping the berms if you can't discharge it.
But has that ever happened? Have we yet to have
No.
a rainstorm enough to overflow the berms at this plant? Or are we just pretending that someday we're gonna get hurricane rains through here 30 years out because of global warming, which I'm, fine with, thinking that things are gonna get worse?
No, I mean, we're just trying to help set the township and the sewer system up so that it lasts for another 30 to 50 years.
This is just an FYI, my parents were here when they put in the sewer system, and our bill was $7,000.
I believe it was 5,000 over Duck Lake when they put that in.
But that was in 2005.
Right, yeah.
So if you look at that amount of money, at
Oh, yeah,
that
you're
time, they paid big bucks make sure that the community is taken care of. So I think, you know, personally, I hear where you're coming from. I understand with what you're saying. I just want to think that we need to think this preventative instead of going back and having to do something different.
Right.
And I'm not making the decision, however, I'm just thinking that people need to realize, and what did $7,000 in '77 is equal to today? And it is probably close to 30,000 today, if not more.
Right. So there are some things, those 2 lift stations are in very poor condition. They really do need to be reconstructed. When lift stations go bad, you can have a lot of bad things happen. It can back up the homes that connect to them. It can overflow the wet well and you end up with raw sewage coming out of it. It can also be, in order to prevent that from happening, it can also be a really bad nightmare for the people that operate it. They might have to go out there with a portable pump and just, try to make it work, right? So the state wants everybody to have a system that's reliable.
On the lift stations, what was pulled? What was the?
Yeah, so there's a table in there for each lift station. If I can find it. It kind of rates each kind of category of the station. And let me see if I find it. We looked at the condition of the wet well itself, so the concrete of the wet well, the discharge piping, the pumps, the valve chambers, the valves.
Okay, so on station 7 or 11,
Yep.
are both of them the same?
11 had a poor rating for the electrical and the controls, so the panel.
Yeah, I'm not too bad. It's been tore in a few times with problems and the wires, put back in where they go, but that's just a duplex, grinder station, grinder pumps. I put a whole new panel on it for $2,000. On that station.
So that's
On station 7 here, what was so terrible about that?
station 7. Station 7 had fair ratings for everything. Fair wet well, fair pumps, fair electrical.
Right.
I mean, it wasn't.
The only thing I can think of that station, if we ever had to reline it, I've had one station that had to reline it because concrete was coming off the wall. But the rest of them seem to be fine. We've had all new pumps put in it.
Right.
All new discharge pipings put in it. They're not 2 years old.
Right.
Going out into the valve station, that's all original.
Right.
That would be more my concern, not
So
the
that, for the other stations, that's what we're proposing to do, is just replace the valve chamber. Because some of them have flooded, their piping's very corroded. It's just those 2 stations that we felt, especially with the electrical condition, that they needed to be replaced.
On your scoring sheet, you've got all of our pumps are rated as fair condition, but those are new pumps. Why weren't they given a higher score if they had brand new pumps?
So I will have to get back with you on that one, because I didn't actually score them myself. I can check into that for you.
Also, I didn't hear you answer, when he wondered who,
Initiated this.
yes, who
I
initiated
can answer
this?
that question.
Okay.
We did it at a board meeting.
Okay, cool. I'm sorry, I missed it. Thank you for
Yeah.
the information.
Yeah.
Appreciate
I
it.
learned that the sewer department was gonna.
About a
have the
year
money
I
and
had
the money
problems
to
on the
do it.
north side of the lake, so we thought we should get some information
Okay.
on it, and it's kind of like blew up.
Well-
$6 million project.
Right,
I'm sticker shocked here.
it just kind of came up really all of a sudden, that's why, yeah.
That
Got
was
it back last June,
when we were doing the.
wasn't it, June?
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, June,
Yeah.
board meeting in June.
So I just want to point out that, if funding doesn't come in favorably, by favorably, I mean like if you don't get like 100% grant or something, really great, then, it's not a dire situation. You can tackle these in smaller projects. Like, you could tackle just the manhole lining, because that's probably the most urgent thing, really. Tackle just that as a project that you could perhaps fund through your reserve fund in your sewer instead of taking out a loan or something. Or do as many as you can afford in 1 year and kind of do it over a long period of time. But the opportunity exists that you might be able to get a 70 and 80% grant. And then you can have a very reliable system for 40 years to come with, you know, pennies on the dollar really. So that's kind of the thought with this. I know it was a big number, but they were giving out big number grants last year.
So when you get the three alternatives there, you went from doing nothing to hooking up to, I don't know, Carson City or running a pipe to Allen or something.
Yeah, Allen,
something
probably.
ridiculous. Or the third option was this whole huge chunk all at once. But then you just said that this could potentially be broken down if we get a smaller grant. How come there was no alternative presented with a breakdown of spreading this out over revolving loans for multiple years?
Because the grant dollars, like I mentioned, they really only have this year and next year of grant dollars
But that's what
available.
you're expecting for forgiveness potentially, not necessarily the revolving loans, you just get a loan
Yes.
for the money. That's for us to get a chance to get forgiven.
Yes. So, you know, if you go in and you only wanna do like the lining project, and you got that 100% grant funded, well, wouldn't you wish that you got everything that you might need in the next 20 years funded at 100% grant? So that's kind of the mentality with, we want everything that could get, you know, fixed.
And I understand, the only thing I'd say about that is it kind of leaves it almost to like a back into the corner scenario where it's either two unrealistic options that never are gonna happen, or just a huge chunk option. So it doesn't present the community with the options that this could be spread out over the years. We could potentially consider increasing user fees over a number of years to increase the revenue and then pay out of pocket and not be taking out money through a loan to do this huge infrastructure project. I just don't feel like you explored all the potential options that could be used to keep our sewer system running in a reliable fashion, which, if I recall from the goals, was one of the main goals of this.
Right.
So it seems like we could maintain reliability by focusing on the critical needs at the time.
And you could, and that's more suited to like a capital improvements plan, where you work on it over time. The state revolving fund is kind of set up for these larger projects, and in fact, one of the things they look at is how much debt you have. So, you know, you may not qualify as overburdened unless you take out a $3 million loan.
So we're making ourselves overburdened by taking out more money? Is that what you just said?
Yes, but
We're
you
putting ourselves
don't
in
get a
place, right?
chance to get grant money if you're not overburdened. You don't
Well,
get
I
a chance
get
to get
that.
subsidized
But
loan money
you're
if
putting
you're
us
not.
into the overburden category by taking out more money, so you're making us a risky community, a risky financial entity by taking out a bunch of debt.
Well, and this is
To qualify
a
for
discussion we can have when we find
Yes,
out
that's
from the
exactly-
grant platforms
exactly.
if we're getting anything,
It's just-
right?
Fair.
The nature of the funding program, kind of, to some extent. But if the project funding isn't there, you know, if they come back and you're not even in the fundable range for a loan, then definitely we can break it out into smaller chunks that can be done over, you know, like a 10-year type project.
Okay, I'm thinking finances, and maybe this is a question for the board to think about. If we decide to do it in chunks, that means that they have to allocate the money in our regular budget. And if you don't have it, we don't even have any extra left over in our regular budget, so that means we're gonna have to raise the taxes. Which would be for
Raise the
everybody.
The user
Well,
rates.
everybody's gonna pay for it anyways, too.
Well, no, only the
fee for sewer.
only the people that have
Well,
a sewer hookup. Sewer
But they can raise the sewer hookup charge.
You would have to
through
raise the
user
sewer
fees.
hookup charge.
However, what I'm saying is that it's a one way or the other. Because it's the guy pays somehow. And what they're suggesting is if we go with the big thing, we don't have to do anything if we don't get it.
Right.
So, I mean, we, you know, it's like, let's go for it. And because if you're not gonna get penalized for it, why not? Because I think that if we do it in chunks, and the budget has gotta come, okay, well, we're not gonna do this, but we need to save money for this. So, it's one way or the other, it's just.
Yeah, everything that you said is correct, except that you can't use tax money on the whole township to pay for the sewer. You would have to raise just the sewer rates, and you might end up raising them close to that $20, you know,
Right.
to pay for
Would be.
things over time.
Bonnie Knetz, I'm assuming, and please correct me if I'm wrong, I'm assuming that your firm will also be doing the grant, applications?
That's what this is. It is the application we're
I
submitting.
thought this was the application for the loan.
Oh, sorry, the grant and loan, it's kind of a,
Oh, it's a dual,
it's a, yeah.
hand in hand? Okay.
Yep, if you
That
get
was not
funding
clear.
through the state revolving fund, the state will determine how much grant, how much loan.
So there will be no additional grant application that we
Not
have
for
to do?
state revolving fund, no. However, if you did wanna go for a rural development application, like for a grant loan through them, that's a slightly different process. This engineering study would be, or, you know, it's already done, but there's just a few other things you have to do for them right up front.
Last one, and I'll keep my mouth shut. Okay, so, this is kind of more of a question for the board and probably less for you. Has there been any consideration about changing the user fee structure? Currently, my understanding is for each hookup, you're getting charged $20 per month, regardless of how much pressure you're putting on the sewer. So say for somebody in a modest house like over on Duck Lake area, that's, 3-bedroom, 1 bath, they're pumping 1 bathroom worth of water into the sewer system and putting source on it. Whereas over here in Crystal, we've had quite a buildup on the lake and a number of houses that are probably sitting with 5 to 6 bathrooms in them and fill up with 20 to 30 revelers every weekend to party and have a good time. So they're pumping a lot more water into the sewer system than what somebody at just their modest houses, or maybe their retirement home over at another location. Yet they're paying the same amount. Has there been any thought given, or is there even any way, since we don't have meters, I know in the cities they usually charge you based on water usage, we don't have that, so maybe it's not even feasible. But it seems like, an assessed number of bathrooms per structure, that seems like something you guys could figure out.
However, how many people are gonna tell us how many
We got
bathrooms they
A
have?
bunch
for
of people
sure.
in Crystal are going all winter. Nobody coming in.
And those people are also paying higher taxes. They're paying non-homestead taxes. And they're paying probably 3 times what you're paying on taxes, because I know, I used to do that.
I do taxes too, so yeah,
I know,
and
but
I
I'm saying
appreciate that
there's
some
a
people are wealthy enough to own
non-homestead
multiple
taxes.
houses too,
Yeah,
they get to pay for the
You're not
privilege.
paying, if you're homesteaded,
Mm.
you're paying 18 mils less than I'm paying, and that's a lot of money.
But you own 2 houses, so you're financially secure enough to own 2 houses. You have the benefit of 1 house someplace located in the state or in some other state where you're getting homestead. So you're still getting a homestead benefit, you're just also doing well enough for yourself to buy a second home.
Between the members? Keep it to.
Yeah,
Okay,
is there
I'm sorry, but
anything
I'm
else
guessing.
on the
He's forgetting.
project plan or the, engineering technical stuff that I can?
Are you gonna come back, again before, after you send that in? I only ask because, I only found out, I don't do Facebook or anything like that, and I only found out about this a couple of days ago.
Okay.
And, I work at the local salon, and there's so many people that knew nothing about it. So I really think that this should have been out on everybody's sewer bill, number one, not just on Facebook. It should have been printed on everybody's sewer bill, especially if you've been talking about this since last June or something.
We just got the,
Plan.
Yeah.
And
about
there's a
15
deadline.
days ago.
Yeah.
It's been in
That's
the
all I
paper
saw.
for 15 days.
It's been in the newspaper.
So, like I mentioned, the project list that the state puts together will come out in late summer, early fall, and we can definitely come and talk with, the township board, public, options to move forward, or, whether it's funded or not, kind of stuff. Cause I think at this point, it's kind of we won't know. I have no idea how many applications they're gonna get. Last year, they got a record number, because people wanted that grant money. So whether that's gonna continue, or whether they're gonna get fewer, because so many people already got their projects funded, and, that might increase your chance, I really don't know. So we can probably have that discussion like in September, when that comes out.
What time, when again is this required to be submitted by?
May 1st.
Wednesday.
Wednesday.
Okay.
That's why we had a special
Get
meeting.
these numbers together for how many months?
What?
When did you start the project of assessment?
The assessment we started last, fall,
We approved it in June.
yeah.
Okay.
And
We
we
just
waited,
got the
we
report
waited
15
until
days ago.
Labor Day to start the assessments because of the traffic. And we waited until after Labor Day and it took a long time to get those manholes assessed. And then, you know, we did put the intent to apply in November, which had a $6.5 million cost on it.
I just have one final question.
Mhm.
The manholes that were paved over, did anybody bother to ask them why they did that, or what the process was on that? Why
Chris
negligent
Johnson,
on what they were doing?
Chris Johnson knows more about that.
Well, Chris Johnson's never here at these meetings, I noticed, so maybe he should be the guy to address it.
The county is either did it, Harvey, they're supposed to notify like Kevin, and we've got, what, 1.5 inch risers, they usually go in there and put,
They actually put them on.
they put them on for it.
Like a few times they couldn't get them, so they just paved them.
Yeah.
Certainly did try to cut
So then, of course, the truck drivers like it better, cause they don't rip them out snow plowing. And then they told me if I have any problems, I need to get them, they'll come and help me. I said, you're gonna come and help me at 2 in the morning?
Yeah. That'd be a question for the county.
I'm working
but
with them right now.
what was your name, sir?
Getting risers
Gary
on.
Earls, I live on Shepherd Drive over at Duck Lake.
Anything else?
Well, just so you know, it's not usually, well, Sarah does post it on Facebook, but
I don't do Facebook.
Crystal Township has their own website.
I don't do
Oh,
none of that.
we don't, yeah.
But it should have been put on like the sewer.
Okay, we're gonna move on, we gotta do a
Thanks, Elaine.
Thank you,
resolution,
Elaine.
yeah.
You wanna move forward with them, they need this resolution to submit the application for May 1st, right?
Yes. Yes.
What do you think, Kevin?
I'd like to know how much money we're gonna get. I guess we'll know until, we're gonna know that fall, right?
Right, so the resolution there doesn't commit you to going forward with the project or anything like that. It just is a step that shows that we had this public meeting. The township board wants us to submit that project plan later this week. Yeah, so we kinda need that if you wanna get it scored. But you can always, you know, like
What
I
was the
mentioned,
cost that was paid for that?
$32,000?
Yeah.
32,000.
32,000, and that included all the manhole inspections.
I move that we submit this project plan to the State Clean Water Revolving Fund
I will
for
second.
consideration.
I will second that.
Do a roll call vote, Sarah,
Yay.
Nancy,
Yes.
Kurt,
Yeah.
Pat, yes, Alicia.
Yes.
So it goes past, motion carried, we close the public hearing on the sewer department at 8:17, go back into our regular public meeting.
So there was some confusion last month on the Huntington credit card. We did need the resolution, so that's what this is. It's a resolution to allow for the commercial credit card. This is given to you by the Huntington. I make a motion to approve this resolution.
Do you wanna do this, how this is reading, Pam? The following resolution was offered by Township Board Member and was seconded by.
Okay. So
you're
I'm making the motion and was seconded by,
me. Nancy.
Any discussion? Okay, roll call vote.
Alicia,
Yes.
Pat, yes, Kurt,
Yes.
Nancy,
Yes.
Sarah.
Yep.
Okay, we had a call of the health department after the last board meeting for a well permit up in the park. And we need to get a board vote, we need to give them a check for $375 for a well permit. Yep.
Nobody saw any of those sealed bids that you read them out, but you know, should have been able to look at those to see what all was included. So I kind of think that was one way to do that. I don't know what to do about it now. But every board member should have looked at those bids.
Oh, I guess I should have passed them on because they were sealed bids. I could give you one before the board meeting.
I didn't want one before the board meeting. It would have been after. So, how do we know that some of those other bids didn't include the permit? Or that one
They would,
did, you know? What did they say?
They didn't get the permit, we had to get the permit.
But I don't know what any of them said. Like I said, it's probably a little bit too late now.
They all just bid it on was it 100 foot? And then it's so much a foot if they gotta go deeper.
And every single one,
Well, I can give you copies of them.
I'd like that. Could you?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And I think going forward, please let's do that, okay? So after you open them, everybody gets to look at them.
Okay.
All right, thank you. I'll make a motion that we buy that, permit.
Second.
Motion by Nancy, second by Lease, purchase the well permit for the park for $375. Any more discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carried. Back at our spring cleanup, the guys and ladies, they separate the steel out of the trash that comes out there. We had 2 trailer loads. We had a third one they figured was on the ground because we didn't have a trailer to put it in. Sunday night, somebody decided it was theirs. Like Patty told me when I came in Monday, the good news was they didn't sort through it, they took it all.
So who sorts through it?
The people you guys dumping out there, like Nancy, Sarah, the.
No.
You guys just checked them in? The Pat and our other guy,
Talk to 'em.
Mitch.
The Granger guys and our DPW.
They don't throw them in there.
Come back to the township.
Well, Monday, we had a guy across the street come and gave us, we called, started out with Alma, we said, well, we just called the scrap metal places, tell them to look out, because they knew some of the stuff that was left out there. And they said, can't do nothing until you call the police. So they called the county sheriff, they gave us the state police, he was here within half hour. By the end of the day, they caught the guy. He said it was a mistake, he thought it was his. He's wanting.
That's not what this
He
letter
was very
says.
sorry.
That is not
He
what
called
this
me,
says.
so.
Yeah, it was by the fire barn, and I'll just help you out without telling you.
He said but anyways, the state police told me we can take his money, he's offering to pay us back. Our lawyer tells us we shouldn't take the money because the police are still turning it over to the prosecutor. But he says that won't have nothing to do with the prosecutor, which I kinda thought maybe it would if we settled with him out ourselves. But he says it won't. But then our lawyer said, well, if you don't take his money, you might not get no money. So the guy is willing to pay us $80. Our other loads brought 200 and some and
It's almost $400 total.
total, yeah.
Yeah, and that chair alone is gonna be more weight than that, like this
But
is
the chair's
something.
probably
Well, I told him, I said, well, we need a weight slip.
Yeah.
He's trying to say, well, half the load I already had loaded, was his. And I said, well, we need a weight slip.
I would say we don't take any money, since the prosecutor's getting it anyway, let it work its way through.
Yeah, I agree.
Motion by Daly, seconded by Little.
Yeah.
Moving this right along.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carried. ARPA funds. Nancy?
Well, where do you wanna spend them on? I kinda did a general because I was told by MTA, just do a general where you might spend them. You will not be doing the final report for another year, it just has to be obligated. So I put park and the building,
What we got, 125 you said?
about like that, yeah, I don't have my number in front of me. So those are the general ones that I think we would probably put it on. That can be changed next year, but that way the report
Should
would be
we,
fine.
use some of the foreseen this down out here?
I could, well, that would be
Yeah,
part of the
or-
park project.
Right.
Park project or building.
Either
Well,
one.
yeah, you could,
It's still,
yeah,
there's a lot of things that qualifies underneath that.
Okay.
I like that.
So like split it in half? Just
I know, I
Dead
took the
middle.
whole dollar amount and it's going either towards the building or the park. We can detail next year's report. Okay?
Okay, and then that moves us down, what's commercial and what's not.
Yep, we've got some folks around town who, there's some young kids who are doing lawns, there are some folks who tend gardens, that they do have a business, but they are not big time and they do not think they are commercial. So that is what I said I would bring to us to discuss. If you're a business, are you commercial period, or what's that definition look like for us?
I think if they're a business, that's commercial.
If they
That's
accept
just-
money for what they're doing.
Right, that is a business, which is commercial.
I also am kind of along that line, but everybody needs to weigh in.
Yeah.
I guess,
Do you have thoughts on it?
And,
I think it'd be commercial, yeah.
Okay.
and then the thing is, because I've heard people, coming into town to mow my lawn and rake my leaves, because they're doing my yard, they feel it's okay, but they're not
But
commercial.
that's,
So, just some
I
clarification.
have also
whatever,
heard the
whatever
same
you
thing.
pay, so you're also
Recycle.
including paying them to dispose of it,
Right,
obviously,
right.
and that makes it commercial and not in our other place.
So if you're getting
That's my
paid,
thought.
if you're getting paid to do it, it's commercial.
And you should build it into your payment.
yes.
Take it
So
on
you're
track.
saying in the fall on leaves, a lot of the people around Crystal hire Larry Turner to rake their leaves to the side of the road, so we shouldn't pick them up, because that'd be commercial.
I'm not saying that, I'm asking
Well, that's
you
what I was wondering
guys.
what you guys were gonna.
This is
No.
if they can take them out there, and
Out
they've been paid. They've been paid to clean it up.
The new sign went up out there, it says no commercial. I had two people get a hold of me in the past week saying, I don't think I'm commercial. And I wasn't gonna go Lone Ranger in it, and so I wanted to bring it here so we could discuss it.
And we
Come
pick
up with a
those
definition.
things that
Right.
Larry has put there, so that's
But they're
different.
paying to get it done.
They are not being taken out there
No,
by
I
Larry.
agree.
Right. He's leaving them there for us.
Right, yeah.
Yeah,
He's just doing a service, putting them by the road.
So if you receive money for yard services, you are commercial in this body's eyes.
Cannot, yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Sarah.
You're welcome.
Okay, let's just back down, any more public comment?
I have one. You were talking before about scrap steel or scrap metal. What's being done about some of this blight around here? I know we're not zoned, but there are places around here that are absolutely decrepit, is the way they present themselves to the community. I mean, they've got trash, and we're not talking about farm implements, Kurt. We're talking about trash. What's
No.
being done about that?
If you come in and fill out you don't have to put your name
We have
down.
done that, we have done that.
Nothing got
I've gone
done.
to Stanton, I've filled out the application with the sheriff's department, and they do respond. That doesn't seem to change anything. You know, you were talking before about scrap steel. I don't think there's a big market for it now, but potentially, we could maybe assist some of these people in cleaning up their lots and taking that steel to Pat Mills or to recyclers and maybe doing something with it. Even these trash cars have a value. You just have to have the means of getting the hell out of here and take them to Lansing or someplace that recycles them, right? So potentially that is an income source for some of these people who seem to want to collect all this trash.
Alright,
So that's where I'm coming from. What do you think about that?
we've got one on the deal right now, and I don't know how, out on Muskrat Road, east of the church. they took them, the counties took him to court, gave him 30 days to clean up. And I guess if you don't clean up in 30 days, they go back to court. That's what the sheriff tells us.
Well, again, the sheriff's hands are somewhat tied. He can only go so far because there's no zoning. And
Well, we
apparently,
use the county zoning.
Yeah.
which means there's no zoning in Crystal Township. Correct? Am I wrong about that?
Well, we do have the option to create a township ordinance, but that would require working with the prosecutor to make sure that that goes both ways, and they are amenable to having some kind of program to do that.
You know, you have properties literally a block from here that are an eyesore. Why? You have this beautiful lake right here, one of the nicest lakes in the area. You have a block from that lake, you got this giant eyesore. I don't get it.
But I think, I feel the township, by having our cleanup days, hopefully is encouraging people to take their blight there. I mean, for free. A lot of townships don't offer that twice a year.
I knew, they normally overfit the bins, I'm aware of that too. But obviously, these people probably aren't participating in what you're talking about.
We try to hold their hands and you just can't. We've tried.
No, those are the people you about need the sheriff to get on them hard. And
We've tried over here. We've tried.
We've talked to the sheriffs, I went over to Stanton, I've talked to them. We filled out their forms, and it only goes so far, but again, I think the community should put some more pressure on these people, that, hey, this is not acceptable. You know, we can do better than this. If you need help cleaning up your mess, we can recruit some people to help you clean up your mess and transport this stuff to some other place that can dispose of it properly. You know, you have a beautiful lake here.
Yeah.
You know, a block from the lake, you've got these eyesores. I don't get it.
Yeah.
Guys at the theater had the best idea with that bucket of popcorn, because that couch and chair was gone the next day.
Well, maybe you could put a free sign on it, maybe that would work, I don't know. But even those junk cars, you take them to, that place in Lansing, they'll buy them from you for $100 to $300 a piece.
Yeah.
So again, some of these guys with 20 cars in their lot, they've got a couple $1,000 sitting in their yard, right?
There's no plates on them, there's nothing.
No.
They're
Go
just
ahead,
sitting on
I'm
there.
Our,
Well, I know exactly what you're talking about, and they are probably parked in the road easement. Because there's places around the lake, it's 0 easement, up to 60 feet when you go around that curve around there. That, I call it by the Hawaii House, I don't know what it's called. Around it, the easement is 60 feet in the center line, so it's 30 feet and 30 feet. Now, before that corner, there's someplace over here by the park, if you just go up near Sweet Street. It's got all sorts of junk stuff thrown in there, and there's no house there. I mean, how many people know where I'm talking about? You know what I'm talking about? It's right over here, right off Sweet Street.
is that where all the bikes are at?
You got Lake
Is that where all the
Street.
bikes are at? The bikes?
I don't know, it's just junk. And so I think that what we could do is write a letter to the county, but the problem is, if the township would, in concert, if the township would write, we understand that there's a complaint against here, how can we help you to remove this?
Township's not supposed to help, that is
Right.
not our,
Okay,
our
we're not
road.
gonna help, we're gonna do it.
Well, and go for it, town folk.
Yeah.
But
Well,
what we
it
can
would-
do is look at creating an
Okay,
ordinance.
If I
It
take
would
my
be
truck,
great.
if I take my trailer out there and I say, I thought it was mine.
Oh, she's done that. She's done that. I warned you, she's done that.
I thought it was free, I thought this one helped me know.
I don't know, perhaps we could do that.
Anybody else?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Motion by Sarah, second by Nancy, to adjourn at 8:33. Thank
Nineteen 1977.